The steady beep of medical equipment was the first sound that greeted me when I opened my eyes. White ceiling, antiseptic smell, pain, sharp and dull at once, radiating from my ribs and face. I tried to move, but every muscle protested. "Don't," a soft voice said. A nurse appeared in my peripheral vision. "You've got 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and more bruises than I care to count." Memory came rushing back in fragmented pieces. The alley behind Rossi's restaurant where I worked. Taking out trash after closing. 2 men, hands grabbing. My screams. Blows raining down. Then nothing. "My son," I whispered, my throat raw. "Where's Tommy?" "He's fine, honey. Your neighbor has him. Mrs. Petrelli, right? She called the ambulance when you didn't come home." The nurse adjusted something on my IV. "The police want to talk to you when you're up for it." I closed my eyes. Tommy was safe. That's all that mattered. At 5 years old, my son was my entire world. The reason I worked double shifts at Rossi's, saving every penny to move us out of our cramped apartment in a neighborhood that grew more dangerous by the day. "How long have I been here?" My voice sounded strange, muffled through swollen lips. "Since last night. It's about 2 in the afternoon now." I'd missed my morning shift. Mr. Rossi would understand. But I couldn't afford to lose even 1 day's pay. Not when Tommy needed new winter clothes, and I was 3 months behind on saving for community college classes. The nurse left, and I drifted into a haze of pain and medication. When I opened my eyes again, shadows had lengthened across the room. A doctor had come and gone. Police had asked questions I couldn't fully answer. I remembered little about my attackers. Just that they'd called me by name before the first blow landed. The attack wasn't random. That thought terrified me more than anything. As evening approached, the hospital quieted. My dinner sat untouched on the rolling tray, jello and broth that I couldn't stomach. The pain medication made me drowsy, but anxiety kept me from sleep. How would I pay these medical bills? When could I see Tommy? Would those men come back to finish what they started? The sound of commotion in the hallway pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. "Sir." Visiting hours ended at 7, a nurse's protest. "Make an exception." A man's voice. Low. Authoritative. Not a request. Footsteps approached my room, and I tensed, sending fresh waves of pain through my battered body. The door opened. The man who entered wasn't what I expected. Tall and broad-shouldered in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. His dark hair was styled impeccably, and his clean-shaven face held features so symmetrical they seemed almost unreal. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the dim light. Behind him stood another man, wider, rougher-looking, with a scar running from his ear to his chin. "Ms. Emma Harper?" The first man approached my bed slowly, as if sensing my fear. I clutched the thin hospital blanket. "Who are you?" "Antonio Ricci." He stated his name as if it should mean something to me. It didn't. Though something about the name Ricci tickled my memory. Something I'd overheard at the restaurant, perhaps. "I own Rossi's restaurant," he continued. "Among other businesses." That surprised me. I'd worked at Rossi's for over a year and had never seen this man. The restaurant was run day to day by Marco Rossi, a boisterous middle-aged man who treated his staff like family. "Mr. Rossi owns—" "Marco manages for me," Ricci interrupted smoothly. "He's my cousin." He moved closer, and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne with notes of cedar and something darker, more primal. His presence filled the small room, making it feel even smaller. "I make it a point to know when my employees are harmed." His gaze traveled over my injuries, and something flashed in his eyes, something cold and dangerous that made me shiver despite the room's warmth. "The police are handling it," I said weakly. A slight smile curved his lips, though no amusement reached his eyes. "Of course." He gestured to the chair beside my bed. "May I?" I nodded, unsure what else to do. The second man, the bodyguard I presumed, took position by the door, face impassive. Ricci sat with a fluid grace that spoke of complete self-assurance. From an inside pocket of his jacket, he withdrew a slim envelope and placed it on my bedside table. "Your medical expenses will be covered." Again, not a question or offer. I can't accept. You can. You will. His voice remained gentle, at odds with the steel beneath his words. You're under my protection, Ms. Harper. That should have been clear to everyone. Under his protection? I'd never even met this man before. Why would anyone think I was connected to him? His dark eyes studied me, reading my confusion. Marco speaks highly of you, a hard worker, a devoted mother. He tilted his head slightly, a woman trying to escape something, or someone. I tensed. My past wasn't something I discussed, not even with co-workers. Tommy's father was a mistake I'd made at 19, a charming con man who'd disappeared with my savings and left me pregnant and alone. I'd rebuilt my life piece by painful piece since then. I respect privacy, Ms. Harper, Ricci continued, but I need to know if this attack was random or targeted. The question made me uncomfortable, but something about his presence compelled honesty. They knew my name, called me by it before it happened. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, icy. He reached forward, and I flinched involuntarily. A flash of something, regret, concern, crossed his features before his face became unreadable again. Slowly, telegraphing his movements, he adjusted the blanket that had slipped from my shoulder. You need rest, he said, rising from the chair. My driver will take you home when you're discharged. Your apartment has been secured. Secured? What is that? New locks, better ones. He reached into another pocket and placed a key on the table beside the envelope. I've also taken the liberty of having your son brought to your neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Petrelli, I believe. She's being compensated for the extended childcare. My head spun. How had he arranged all this in what must have been hours? And why would a man like him, clearly powerful and wealthy, care about a waitress he'd never met? Mr. Ricci, I don't understand. Antonio, he corrected softly. Antonio, I repeated, the name feeling strange on my tongue. Why are you doing this? He paused at the foot of my bed, his dark gaze intense. I take care of what's mine, Emma. My businesses. My people. Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of emotion I couldn't name. Get well. Your job will be waiting. With that, he turned to leave. At the door, he stopped and spoke to his bodyguard, voice too low for me to hear. The larger man nodded once, his expression grim. After they left, I lay awake despite exhaustion and medication, replaying the strange encounter. There had been something unsettling about Antonio Ricci, something that spoke of power beyond what a simple restaurant owner should possess. The way the hospital staff had deferred to him. The casual mention of other businesses. The bodyguard who looked like he'd seen and done things I couldn't imagine. I drifted into uneasy sleep, with the scent of his cologne lingering in the room. The next morning brought a parade of surprises. A different doctor, a specialist I was told, examined me and pronounced my recovery would be quicker than initially estimated. The hospital administrator personally delivered discharge papers along with assurances that everything had been arranged, and when I was wheeled to the hospital entrance, a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. The driver, a compact, sharp-eyed man, who introduced himself simply as Leo, helped me into the back seat with surprising gentleness. The vehicle's interior was luxurious, all buttery leather and polished wood. Mr. Ricci asked me to give you this, Leo said, handing me a smartphone. His number is programmed in. Call if you need anything, day or night. I don't need boss's orders. Leo cut me off with a polite but firm tone that suggested arguing would be pointless. As we drove through the city, I stared at the unfamiliar phone in my hand, wondering what kind of man could command such immediate obedience from everyone around him. By the time we reached my apartment building in the Eastern District, an area that had seen better days, I had more questions than answers. Leo insisted on escorting me upstairs, carrying the small bag of belongings the hospital had provided. In the dingy hallway outside my apartment stood a man I didn't recognize, broad-shouldered and vigilant, with the same alert readiness I'd seen in Antonio's bodyguard. He nodded to Leo, then to me. Ms. Harper. Emma, this is Dante, Leo explained. He'll be keeping an eye on things for a while. Keeping an eye? You mean like a guard? I fumbled with the new key Antonio had given me. Noting the heavy-duty deadbolt that hadn't been there before, Leo shrugged. Just a precaution. The inside of my apartment had been transformed. Nothing major. The furniture was the same. The walls still needed paint. But it was immaculately clean. Fresh flowers sat on my small dining table. The refrigerator, when I checked, was stocked with food. On the counter was a note in elegant handwriting. Rest. Heal. Everything else is handled. A.R. Tommy? I asked Leo. The little man is still with your neighbor. Mr. Ricci thought you might want a day to rest before he comes home. I sank onto my couch, overwhelmed. Why is he doing all this? Leo gave me a long look. The boss has his reasons. He moved toward the door. Dante will be outside. Call the number in the phone if you need anything. After he left, I sat in the quiet apartment, trying to make sense of it all. I'd gone from anonymous waitress to being under the apparent protection of a man who commanded such power that hospitals changed their visiting hours and specialists appeared on demand. The realization hit me with sudden clarity. Antonio Ricci wasn't just a business owner. The bodyguards, the instant compliance from everyone, the casual display of influence. I'd seen enough movies to recognize the signs. I was now somehow entangled with someone connected to organized crime, and I had no idea why. My hand trembled as I reached for the phone Leo had given me. The screen lit up to reveal a background image of Tommy, a recent photo I didn't recognize. Him laughing on a playground swing. The sight sent ice through my veins. How had Antonio gotten this picture? Had he been watching us? Before I could process this, the phone vibrated with an incoming text message. Rest, Emma. We'll speak tomorrow. Your son is happy and safe. No signature. None needed. I curled up on the couch, hugging a pillow to my aching ribs, mind racing with questions I was afraid to have answered. Outside my window, darkness gathered, bringing with it the strange sense that my life had irreversibly changed course in the span of 24 hours. What I didn't know then was just how profound that change would be, or what price would come with Antonio Ricci's protection. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, each time interrupted by pain, or the startling awareness of someone stationed outside my door. By morning, I felt like I'd run a marathon, my body stiff and my mind foggy from the prescribed painkillers. The soft knock at my door just past 9 made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Petrelli's familiar round face, and beside her, my heart leapt, Tommy, clutching his worn stuffed dinosaur. Mommy? Tommy barreled into the apartment as soon as I opened the door, stopping short when he saw my face. His lower lip trembled. You got hurt? I knelt carefully, ignoring the protest from my ribs, and gathered him into a gentle hug. Just some bruises, baby. I'm okay. Over his head, I met Mrs. Petrelli's concerned gaze. The older woman had been my neighbor for 3 years, and had become something of a surrogate grandmother to Tommy. That man, she said quietly, her Italian accent thickening with emotion. He came yesterday. Very important man. Mr. Ricci? I asked, feeling a chill despite the apartment's warmth. She nodded, eyes widening. You know him? Not really. He visited me in the hospital. Mrs. Petrelli crossed herself quickly. He was very generous, paid me for watching Tommy, brought groceries. She lowered her voice. Emma, do you know who he is? In the old neighborhood, the Ricci family was... She stopped, glancing at Tommy, who was now examining the contents of our refrigerator with delight. Was what? I prompted. She shook her head. Just be careful, Kara. Such men don't do favors without expecting something in return. With a quick kiss to my cheek, she left, closing the door behind her. I spent the morning trying to maintain normalcy for Tommy's sake, reading his favorite books and watching cartoons while he nestled against me on the couch. But my thoughts kept drifting to Antonio Ricci and what Mrs. Petrelli had left unsaid. Just after noon, the phone he'd given me vibrated with a text message. May I visit at 2 p.m.? AR. The formality of asking permission seemed at odds with the man who had commandeered a hospital room and apparently had my apartment under surveillance. Still, I appreciated the gesture. Yes, I texted back simply. I spent the next hour in a state of nervous anticipation, tidying the already clean apartment and trying to make myself presentable. The bruising on my face had deepened to purple-black, and no amount of concealer would hide it. Eventually, I settled for a clean pair of jeans and a soft sweater, my hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. At exactly 2 o'clock, a knock sounded. Tommy looked up from his coloring book, curious. "A friend of mine," I explained, moving carefully to the door. Antonio stood in the hallway, today in a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. In one hand he carried a sleek leather briefcase, in the other, a gift bag with cartoon dinosaurs printed on it. "Emma." He nodded, his dark gaze taking in my appearance. "You look better today. The wonders of actually sleeping in a bed," I replied, stepping back to let him enter. His presence seemed to fill my small apartment, making it shrink around him. Every piece of furniture, every framed photograph I'd carefully selected, suddenly looked shabby and inadequate. His attention shifted to Tommy, who had abandoned his coloring to stare at our visitor. "Hello, young man," Antonio's voice softened, losing some of its commanding edge. He crouched to Tommy's level, extending the gift bag. "I heard you're taking care of your mother while she gets better." Tommy nodded solemnly, accepting the gift with wide eyes. "She got hurt." "Yes, she did." Something dark flashed across Antonio's features before he controlled it. "That's why it's important you help her." "May I?" He gestured to the bag. Tommy nodded, and Antonio carefully removed the tissue paper to reveal a plush Tyrannosaurus Rex of much higher quality than any toy my son currently owned. "Rex is my favorite," Tommy breathed, clutching the dinosaur to his chest. "A fine choice." Antonio straightened, his gaze meeting mine over Tommy's head. "A protector. Fierce." I cleared my throat. "Tommy, why don't you take your new friend to your room for a bit? Mommy needs to talk to Mr. Ricci." "Antonio," he corrected gently. "Antonio," I echoed, watching as Tommy disappeared into his bedroom, already deep in conversation with his new toy. When we were alone, Antonio set his briefcase on my dining table. "How are you feeling, truly? Sore? Confused?" I crossed my arms protectively. "Why are you here, Mr. Ricci? Why the bodyguard outside? The groceries, the phone, all of it?" He studied me for a long moment. "As I said, I protect what's mine." "But I'm not yours," I countered, immediately regretting my boldness when his expression darkened. "You work for me," he stated. "That makes you my responsibility." He moved to the window, looking out at the street below with a frown. "This neighborhood isn't safe. It's what I can afford." He turned back to me. "Not anymore." From his briefcase, he withdrew a folder and placed it on the table. "I've taken the liberty of securing more appropriate accommodations. A 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights. Better schools. Security building." I stared at the folder without opening it. "I can't afford Riverside Heights. It's handled." "By you?" I shook my head. "I don't accept charity, Mr. Ricci." "Antonio," he corrected again, more firmly. "And it's not charity. It's a relocation package. You'll continue working at Rossi's, with a promotion to assistant manager when you're healed." My mouth fell open. "I don't have the experience for—" "Marco says otherwise." His tone brooked no argument. "The apartment comes with the position, for your safety and Tommy's." I sank into a chair, feeling overwhelmed. "Why?" Antonio sat across from me, his dark eyes intent on mine. "Because the men who attacked you weren't random thugs, Emma. They were sent." Ice flooded my veins. "Sent? By whom?" "That's what I'm determining." His voice had gone cold, clinical. "They knew your name, your routine. This wasn't opportunistic. But why would anyone target me? I'm nobody. I don't have enemies." "Everyone has enemies," he said quietly. "Some they don't even know about." He leaned forward. "I need you to think, Emma. Has anyone unusual contacted you recently? Asked questions? Shown particular interest in you or Tommy?" I thought back over recent weeks, trying to recall any strange encounters. There was a man at the restaurant last week. He requested my section 3 days in a row. Left large tips. I frowned, trying to remember details. Dark hair, expensive watch. He asked where I lived, if I had family. Antonio's expression hardened. "And did you tell him?" "Of course not. I've waited tables long enough to know better." I rubbed my temples, where a headache was forming. I did mention Tommy, not by name, just that I had a son. He seemed disappointed. What else? Nothing I can think of. My life is boring, Antonio. I work, I take care of Tommy, I sleep, repeat. He nodded slowly. The men who attacked you, they asked nothing, said nothing specific. A fragment of memory surfaced. Words hissed into my ear as blows rained down. One of them said something about sending a message, that he should know better. Antonio went very still. Those exact words? I nodded, watching as his jaw tightened. They weren't sent for you, he said after a long moment. They were sent for me. You? But you were attacked to send me a message. His hands clenched on the table. Someone is testing boundaries. My head spun with implications. But how would hurting me affect you? We'd never even met. Something shifted in his expression. A calculation. A decision made. I've been aware of you for some time, Emma. The admission sent a chill through me. What does that mean? It means I notice when someone exceptional works for me. Marco speaks highly of your work ethic, your character. I made inquiries. You investigated me? Indignation flared through my confusion. I look after my investments. His gaze was unapologetic. You have potential beyond serving tables. I had planned to offer you advancement eventually. So someone thought hurting me would... What? Hurt your business? Antonio's laugh was without humor. No, Emma. Someone thought hurting you would hurt me personally. He stood abruptly. Which is why you're moving. Today. I can't just... You can and will. His tone left no room for discussion. For Tommy's sake, if not your own. At the mention of my son, my resistance crumbled. If there was even a chance Tommy might be in danger, fine, I conceded. But the job, I won't accept special treatment. I need to earn my position. A smile ghosted across his lips. Stubborn. Good. He reached for the folder, opening it to reveal photographs of an apartment that looked like something from a magazine. Spacious, sun-filled, modern. A car will come at 4. Pack what you need for a few days. The rest will be moved tomorrow. Just like that? I asked, still reeling from how rapidly my life was changing. Just like that, he confirmed. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a frown. I have to go. Business requires my attention. At the door, he paused. Emma, until this matter is resolved, you'll have security with you. Don't try to evade them. Don't go anywhere without letting them know. Am I a prisoner now? His expression softened marginally. No, you're under my protection. There's a difference. He hesitated, then added, The men who hurt you won't touch you again. I promise you that. Something in his voice, a lethal certainty, made me shiver. What will you do to them? Better you don't know. He brushed a finger lightly over the bruise on my cheek, his touch startlingly gentle. Rest. Heal. Let me handle the rest. After he left, I sat motionless at my table, staring at the folder of glossy photographs. My mind struggled to process everything. The attack, Antonio's unexpected interest in my welfare, the implication that I'd been targeted because of him, the sudden upheaval of my carefully constructed life. Tommy emerged from his room, the new dinosaur clutched tightly. Is your friend gone? Yes, sweetie. I pulled him onto my lap, careful of my ribs. How would you feel about moving to a new apartment? One with a bigger bedroom for you? His eyes widened. Can Rex come too? Of course. I kissed the top of his head. We're going to pack some things soon. A car will take us there today. Like in the movies? Tommy bounced excitedly. With a driver? Just like that. As promised, at 4 o'clock, a black SUV identical to the one from the hospital pulled up outside our building. Leo helped load our hastily packed bags, while Tommy chattered excitedly about dinosaurs and new adventures. I took one last look at the apartment that had been our home for 3 years, the place where Tommy had taken his first steps, where I'd slowly rebuilt my life after his father's betrayal. Despite its shabbiness, it represented independence, security I'd created for myself. Now I was accepting help, or perhaps control, from a man I barely knew, a man who moved through the world with dangerous authority, who commanded loyalty with a glance. who had resources I couldn't begin to comprehend. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, I caught sight of a sleek black sedan across the street, its windows tinted. A chill ran through me as I realized we'd likely been watched the entire time, either by Antonio's people or by whoever had ordered the attack. I hugged Tommy closer, wondering what I'd gotten us into, and whether Antonio Ricci's protection would prove more dangerous than whatever threat he claimed to be shielding us from. The new apartment in Riverside Heights took my breath away. Located on the 12th floor of a gleaming high-rise, it offered sweeping views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was 3 times the size of our old place, with hardwood floors, sleek modern furniture, and a kitchen that would make professional chefs envious. "This is where we're going to live?" Tommy whispered, his eyes wide as he clutched Rex the dinosaur. "For now," I answered cautiously, still struggling to process the sudden change in our circumstances. Leo carried our bags to the bedrooms, explaining security features as he moved through the apartment. Key fob access to the building and elevator. Doorman 24/7. The windows are reinforced. Mr. Ricci's people have the apartment on either side, and there's always someone in the lobby. It's like a fortress, I murmured. "That's the idea," Leo replied with a tight smile. He handed me another new phone. "This one's more secure. The boss's number is still programmed in. Use it if you need anything. Groceries, medication, whatever." "When can I go back to work?" I asked, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with this gilded cage. "When the doctor clears you. A week, maybe 2. Leo moved toward the door. "There's a security team downstairs. Don't leave the building without calling first." After he left, I sank onto the plush sofa, feeling like Alice fallen through the looking glass into a world where nothing made sense anymore. Tommy, however, adapted with the resilience of childhood, racing from room to room in delight. "Mom, my bed is huge, and there's a dinosaur lamp." I forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sweetie." The refrigerator and pantry were fully stocked with high-quality foods. In the master bedroom, I discovered a closet filled with new clothes in my size, casual wear, business attire, even evening dresses with tags from boutiques I'd never dared enter. The adjoining bathroom featured marble countertops and a soaking tub big enough to swim in. Everything spoke of money, power, and attention to detail. Antonio Ricci hadn't just relocated us. He'd anticipated our every need, down to Tommy's favorite cereal and the brand of shampoo I used. The realization was both comforting and disturbing. How long had he been watching us? And why? That night, after tucking Tommy into his new bed, I stood at the living room window, looking out at the glittering city below. In the reflection of the glass, I caught a glimpse of my bruised face, a stark reminder of why we were here. Whatever Antonio's motives, he had protected us when we needed it most. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Are the accommodations satisfactory? AR." I hesitated before replying. "Yes, thank you. But this feels like too much." The response came almost immediately. "It's what you deserve. Sleep well, Emma." I stared at those words for a long time. What you deserve. As if he knew anything about what I deserved. The struggles I'd overcome, the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd deferred for Tommy's sake. Yet part of me, a part I was ashamed to acknowledge, relished the comfort and security surrounding us now. For the first time in years, I didn't need to worry about bills or broken appliances, or whether our neighborhood was getting too dangerous. All it had cost was my independence. The next morning, a doctor arrived to check my injuries, not the hospital physician, but a private specialist who examined me with efficient care and pronounced my recovery progressing nicely. He left prescriptions for better pain medication and instructions to rest for another week. Shortly after he left, a knock at the door announced the arrival of movers with our belongings from the old apartment. Everything had been carefully packed and labeled. The men worked quickly, arranging our modest possessions among the new furniture, treating Tommy's toy collection with the same care they might give priceless artifacts. By afternoon, the apartment had transformed again, still luxurious, but now with familiar touches. Tommy's drawings on the refrigerator, my mother's quilt on the back of the sofa, photographs of Tommy and me throughout his childhood displayed on sleek shelves. It was during dinner, a meal I'd actually enjoyed preparing in the gourmet kitchen, when my phone buzzed again. "May I visit at 8 p.m., after Tommy's bedtime? AR." My pulse quickened. I glanced at Tommy, happily devouring spaghetti and chattering about his dinosaur's adventures. "Yes," I texted back, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my stomach. After Tommy was bathed and tucked in with a story, I found myself standing before the closet of new clothes, deliberating as if preparing for a date. The thought made me flush. This wasn't a date. This was... what exactly? A meeting with my boss? My protector? The man who had upended my life in the span of 3 days? I settled on simple black pants and a soft blue sweater that matched my eyes, applied minimal makeup to work around the bruising, and ran a brush through my auburn hair, leaving it loose around my shoulders. At precisely 8 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door. Antonio stood in the hallway, this time in dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater that softened his imposing presence without diminishing it. In one hand, he held a bottle of wine. In the other, a slim folder. "You look well," he said, his dark eyes moving over me in a way that made my skin warm. "The new surroundings agree with you." "They're beautiful," I acknowledged, stepping aside to let him enter. "Excessive, but beautiful." A smile touched his lips. "I've never seen the point in half measures, Emma." In the kitchen, he opened the wine, a red I couldn't pronounce, and poured 2 glasses. We moved to the living room, sitting at opposite ends of the sofa. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, creating an almost romantic ambiance that I tried desperately to ignore. "How is Tommy adjusting?" Antonio asked, sipping his wine. "Children are adaptable. He thinks we're on an adventure." I traced the rim of my glass. "He asked about you today. Called you the dinosaur man." Something softened in Antonio's expression. "He's a good boy. You've done well with him." "Thank you." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in me. "Have you found them? The men who attacked me?" His expression darkened. "Yes." "And?" "They've been dealt with." His tone left no doubt about what that meant. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a disturbing rush of satisfaction, followed by guilt. They were just following orders, weren't they? From whoever wanted to send you a message. Antonio set down his glass. "You're very perceptive. Who was it? Who ordered the attack?" He studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "A business rival. Someone who thought they could gain an advantage by showing they could reach what I value." The implication hung in the air between us. What I value. Not what I own or employ, but what I value. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Out of all your employees, why target me?" Antonio leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because someone noticed my interest in you." "Your interest," I repeated flatly. "You mean your surveillance? Having me investigated?" "My attention," he corrected. "I've been aware of you for months, Emma. Your work ethic, your dedication to your son, the way you managed to maintain dignity and grace despite circumstances that would break many others." I blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected praise. "You don't even know me. I know enough." His gaze was unwavering. "I know you left an abusive relationship 5 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and an infant. I know you worked 3 jobs until you found stability at Rossi's. I know you send money to your mother in Phoenix every month, even when you can barely afford rent." Each accurate detail made my heart beat faster. "How?" "I make it my business to know things." He picked up his wine again. "Just as I made it my business to find the men who hurt you, and the man who sent them." A chill ran through me. "What did you do to him?" Antonio's smile was cold. "I showed him the consequences of his actions." "You killed him." It wasn't a question. "No." He shook his head. "Death would be too quick, too merciful. Vincent Caruso will live a long life remembering what happens when he crosses certain lines." The name meant nothing to me, but the casual mention of violence, implied but unmistakable, reminded me exactly what kind of man sat beside me, not just a successful business owner. Something far more dangerous. "You're afraid of me now," Antonio observed, watching my expression. "Shouldn't I be?" "No." He reached across the sofa, his fingers brushing mine in a touch so light it might have been imagined. "Never you, Emma. I withdrew my hand, needing distance to think clearly. What happens now? Do we stay here indefinitely, under guard? Unable to live normal lives? For now, yes. He reached for the folder he'd brought, opening it to reveal documents. This situation has made me reevaluate certain arrangements. Your position at Rossi's remains open, with the promotion we discussed, but I have another option to present. And I took the papers he offered, scanning what appeared to be an employment contract for an executive assistant position at Ricci Enterprises, with a salary that made me gasp. I'm not qualified for this. You're exactly qualified. Antonio's voice was firm. You're organized, discreet, intelligent, and you learn quickly. The position would provide better hours for a single mother, higher compensation, and... He paused meaningfully. You would be directly under my protection at all times. I set the contract down. You want me to work for you personally. Why? Because I can trust you. The simplicity of his answer surprised me. Trust is rare in my world, Emma. When I find it, I value it. You can't know that you can trust me. We've barely met. I'm an excellent judge of character. He leaned back, studying me. The position is yours if you want it. Think about it. For Tommy's sake, if nothing else. The mention of my son reminded me of the reality we faced. This rival of yours, Caruso. Will he try again? Not anytime soon. Antonio's certainty was chilling. But in my world, there are always threats. Working closer to me would mean better protection. And less freedom, I countered. He inclined his head, acknowledging the truth of it. There are always trade-offs. We sat in silence for a moment, the implications of his offer hanging between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been nagging at me since his first appearance in my hospital room. Why do you care what happens to me? The truth, Antonio. Not business, not responsibility. Why me? Something shifted in his dark eyes. A vulnerability I hadn't seen before, because when Marco showed me your application 2 years ago, with your photograph attached, I recognized something in you, something I've spent my life searching for. What? I whispered. Integrity, he said simply. Strength. Beauty, yes. But beauty with substance behind it. He ran a hand through his immaculate hair, suddenly looking less composed. I had Marco hire you. I kept my distance, had reports on your progress. I intended to approach you properly, eventually. And then I was attacked. And then you were attacked, he confirmed, his expression hardening. Because Vincent Caruso learned of my interest and sought to use it against me, I processed this revelation, emotions warring within me, anger at being watched, evaluated, fear of the dangerous world I'd inadvertently stepped into, and something else, a flutter of attraction I couldn't deny, despite everything. I need time, I said finally, to think about all this, to decide what's best for Tommy and me. Antonio nodded, rising from the sofa. Of course. Take the week to recover. Consider the offer. At the door, he paused. Emma, regardless of your decision, you and Tommy remain under my protection. That's non-negotiable. After he left, I stood at the window again, city lights blurring as I tried to sort through my conflicting emotions. In the space of days, I'd gone from anonymous waitress to the apparent object of a powerful man's interest, a man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure, who spoke of violence with casual certainty, who had upended my life with the ease of someone moving chess pieces. Yet there had been genuine concern in his eyes when he looked at my injuries, gentleness in how he spoke of Tommy, respect in how he presented me with choices, even if they were limited ones. I touched my fingers where his had brushed against them, remembering the unexpected jolt of awareness that had passed between us. What kind of life would we have in Antonio Ricci's world? Protected, comfortable, secure, but at what cost? And what would happen if his interest in me faded? Would Tommy and I be discarded as easily as we'd been collected? Behind me, my son slept peacefully in his new bedroom, surrounded by luxury he'd quickly accepted as normal. For his sake, I needed to make the right choice, whatever that might be. The week that followed brought healing, both physical and mental. My bruises faded from angry purple to yellowing green, and the pain in my ribs diminished to a dull ache. Tommy blossomed in our new environment, making friends with the doorman's son and exploring every inch of our luxury apartment with boundless enthusiasm. I spent my days considering Antonio's offer, weighing security against independence, safety against freedom. Each morning, breakfast arrived from a nearby cafe, delivered by one of Antonio's men, never the same one twice. Each evening, a text message appeared on my phone. All well? AR. My replies remained brief, non-committal. I needed space to think, to process the upheaval of my carefully constructed life. On Thursday evening, a package arrived. A sleek laptop with a note in Antonio's now familiar handwriting. To research Ricci Enterprises. Your decision should be informed. AR. I spent that night after Tommy was asleep reading about Antonio's empire. The public face was impressive enough. Real estate holdings, import-export businesses, a chain of high-end restaurants including Rossi's, investment portfolios spanning multiple industries. But I wasn't naive. Between the lines of business profiles and press releases, I could sense the shadow operations. The enterprises that explained the bodyguards, the instant compliance from everyone, the casual way Antonio spoke of handling those who crossed him. By Friday, I'd made my decision. Not one I was entirely comfortable with, but the only one that made sense for Tommy's future. I texted Antonio, I've decided. Can we meet tomorrow? E. His response came seconds later. Dinner, 7 p.m. I'll send a car. That night, I dreamt of my attack. But this time, Antonio appeared in the alley, his rage terrible as he dealt with my assailants. I woke breathless, unsure whether it had been a nightmare or a fantasy. Saturday morning, I took Tommy to the building's indoor pool, a luxury he'd never experienced before. Watching him splash happily under the watchful eye of our security detail, I wondered if I was making the right choice. Could I really integrate our lives with Antonio's dangerous world? What would I tell Tommy as he grew older? At 6, I left Tommy with Mrs. Petrelli, who had also been relocated to an apartment in our building, another of Antonio's arrangements that both comforted and unsettled me. I dressed carefully in one of the new outfits from the closet, a simple black dress that draped elegantly, neither too formal nor too casual. The woman in the mirror looked polished, confident, a far cry from the exhausted waitress of 2 weeks ago. The car that arrived was not the usual SUV, but a sleek black Mercedes. Leo held the door for me, his expression giving nothing away. Where are we going? I asked as we pulled into traffic. The boss is home, Leo replied, eyes on the road. We drove north out of the city, into the exclusive enclave of Oakwood Hills. Iron gates parted for the car, revealing a winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured trees. The house that came into view took my breath away. A modern mansion of glass and stone, sprawling across meticulously landscaped grounds. Armed men stood at strategic points along the property. Security cameras gleamed from discreet locations. This wasn't just a home, it was a compound. Antonio waited at the front entrance, dressed in tailored black pants and a slate blue shirt that made his dark eyes more intense. He took my hand as I exited the car, his touch lingering longer than necessary. You look beautiful, he said, his gaze traveling over me. How are you feeling? Better, I replied, hyper-aware of his fingers still wrapped around mine, almost healed. He guided me into a soaring entryway with marble floors and a dramatic staircase. I thought dinner at home would allow for more privacy for our discussion. The house was a study in masculine elegance, sleek furnishings, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city in the distance. But for all its grandeur, it felt oddly impersonal, like a high-end hotel rather than a home. No photographs adorned the walls, no personal mementos cluttered surfaces. It was the residence of a man who revealed only what he chose to reveal. Your home is beautiful, I said as we entered a formal dining room where a table was set for two, candlelight gleaming off crystal and silver. It serves its purpose, Antonio replied, pulling out my chair. But it's just a house. A server appeared with wine and appetizers, moving with the silent efficiency I was coming to associate with everyone in Antonio's orbit. After pouring our wine, he disappeared, leaving us alone. You've made your decision, Antonio stated, watching me over the rim of his glass. I nodded, taking a fortifying sip of wine. I'll accept the position at Ricci Enterprises. Something like triumph flashed in his eyes before he controlled it. A wise choice. With conditions, I added quickly. His eyebrow raised slightly. Go on. I set down my glass, meeting his gaze directly. I want a separate security detail for Tommy when I'm working. Someone specifically assigned to him, who he can become comfortable with. Done. What else? I want transparency. If I'm going to work closely with you, I need to understand what I'm involving myself in. I took a deep breath. I know Ricci Enterprises isn't just restaurants and real estate, Antonio. His expression gave nothing away. You believe I'm involved in illegal activities? I believe you're involved in things you don't put in press releases, I countered carefully. I'm not asking to be privy to everything, but I need to know enough to protect Tommy and myself. Antonio studied me for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. Fair enough. Anything else? I want to be clear about personal boundaries. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. This is a professional arrangement. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. For now. Before I could respond, the server returned with our first course, an artfully plated seafood dish. As we ate, Antonio steered the conversation to lighter topics. Tommy's adjustment to our new home, my recovery, books we'd both read. He was surprisingly well-versed in literature, quoting Dante and Hemingway with equal ease. By the time dessert arrived, I'd almost forgotten the danger that had brought us together, the violence that surrounded him like an invisible cloak. In this setting, he was charming, attentive, his dark intensity focused entirely on me, in a way that was both flattering and unsettling. Tell me about Tommy's father, he said abruptly as coffee was served. The question caught me off guard. Why? Because I want to understand all of you, he replied simply. And he's part of your story, I sighed, tracing patterns on the tablecloth. His name was Daniel. I met him when I was 19, working as a waitress, trying to put myself through community college. He was handsome, charming, full of big plans and promises. Antonio's expression darkened. And I was young and naive. By the time I realized he was a con man, he'd cleaned out my savings account and disappeared. I shrugged, the old pain dulled by time. 3 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. He doesn't see Tommy? He doesn't know about Tommy. I met Antonio's gaze, and I prefer it that way. He wasn't a good man, Antonio. He hurt people, used them. If I found him... Don't, I interrupted sharply. That chapter of my life is closed. Tommy doesn't need that kind of man in his life. Antonio nodded slowly. And what kind of man does Tommy need? The question hung between us, laden with implications. Someone stable, I said carefully. Kind. Someone who sees him for the amazing little person he is, not as an obligation or inconvenience. And what kind of man do you need, Emma? His voice had dropped lower, more intimate. I looked away, feeling suddenly exposed. I haven't thought about that in a long time. Tommy has been my focus. A mother and a woman are not mutually exclusive. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing my wrist. You deserve to want things for yourself. The touch sent electricity up my arm. What I want doesn't always align with what's possible. In my experience, Antonio said, his dark eyes intent on mine, very few things are truly impossible. After dinner, he gave me a tour of the house, the state-of-the-art kitchen where a chef prepared meals, the library filled with leather-bound volumes, the home theater, the indoor pool. Each room was impeccable, showcasing wealth and taste without ostentation. We ended in his study, a masculine space with dark wood paneling and views of the illuminated garden. Here, finally, I saw personal touches. A photograph of an older couple I assumed were his parents. A worn edition of Machiavelli's The Prince. A carved wooden box that looked like an heirloom. Antonio moved to a sideboard and poured amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. Brandy? I accepted the glass, feeling oddly comfortable in this sanctum, despite the circumstances that had brought me here. This is where you work? Sometimes. He gestured to an imposing desk. You'll have an office adjacent to mine at the corporate headquarters, but for sensitive matters we often work from here. I sipped the brandy, its warmth spreading through me. When do I start? Monday, if you're feeling well enough. He leaned against his desk, watching me. Leo will drive you. Your security detail will remain in place, with additions as you requested for Tommy. I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what I'd agreed to. In 2 days, I would officially enter Antonio Ricci's world. A world of wealth and danger, power and secrets. Second thoughts? He asked, reading my expression. Concerns, I admitted, about what this means for Tommy, for me. Antonio set down his glass and moved closer, until we stood just inches apart. It means protection, security, a future without financial worry. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face. It means you're no longer alone, Emma. His proximity was intoxicating. The subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body, the intensity of his gaze. Part of me wanted to step back, maintain the professional distance I'd insisted on. Another part, a part I'd suppressed for years, wanted to lean into his touch. Antonio, I whispered, uncertain what I was even asking for. I know, he murmured, his hand cradling my cheek with surprising gentleness. You need time. I can give you that. His thumb traced my lower lip, sending shivers through me. But know this. From the moment I saw you, you were mine. Whether you worked in my restaurant or my office, you were always meant to be mine. The possessive declaration should have alarmed me. Instead, it awakened something primal, a recognition that transcended logic or caution. For years I'd been alone, fighting, surviving, putting Tommy's needs above my own. The idea of belonging to someone, of being claimed and protected, held a dark appeal I couldn't deny. Before I could respond, Antonio stepped back, breaking the spell. It's getting late. You should return to Tommy. The drive home was a blur, my thoughts consumed by Antonio's touch, his words, the way he'd looked at me, as if I were something precious and rare. By the time I reached our apartment, Mrs. Petrelli had already put Tommy to bed. I checked on him, watching his peaceful sleep and wondering what future I was creating for us. My phone buzzed with a text as I prepared for bed. You made the right choice. Sleep well. Tomorrow begins our new arrangement. A.R. I stared at the message, feeling like I stood at a precipice. Monday would change everything, draw me deeper into Antonio's orbit, bind our lives more tightly to his. There would be no going back to the anonymity of before, the simple struggle of everyday existence. For better or worse, Tommy and I were now part of Antonio Ricci's world. A world where protection came with possession, where security was purchased with freedom, where danger and luxury walked hand in hand. As I drifted toward sleep, I couldn't escape the feeling that I'd made a deal with a devil, a devastatingly attractive, unexpectedly considerate devil, but a devil nonetheless. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the caution and concern, a part of me thrilled at the bargain struck. Monday morning arrived with a surreal sense of normalcy, making breakfast for Tommy, helping him dress for school, kissing him goodbye as he left with Dante, now officially assigned as his personal security. The man's imposing presence had softened around my son, his gruff exterior giving way to genuine protectiveness. I'll guard him with my life, Ms. Harper, Dante had promised when Antonio formalized the arrangement. I believed him. Leo arrived precisely at 8 to drive me to Ricci Enterprises headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper of steel and glass in the financial district. In the elevator, rising swiftly to the top floor, my stomach fluttered with nerves. Was I prepared for this transition? Could I truly adapt to Antonio's world? The executive floor hummed with quiet efficiency. A sleek receptionist greeted me by name without introduction and led me to an office adjacent to Antonio's, spacious, elegantly appointed, with views of the city skyline. Mr. Ricci will be in shortly, she informed me. Your credentials and system access are prepared. Maria will orient you to the daily operations. Maria proved to be a stern-faced woman in her 50s, who clearly ran the administrative side of Antonio's empire with military precision. She spent the morning walking me through schedules, filing systems, security protocols, and communication procedures. The complexity of Antonio's business interests was dizzying. Legitimate enterprises layered with connections that hinted at the shadowy operations beneath. The most important rule, Maria emphasized, fixing me with a penetrating stare, is absolute discretion. You will see and hear things in this position that never leave this floor. Understood? I nodded, recognizing the weight of what I was accepting. It was nearly noon when Antonio appeared in my doorway, impeccable in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His presence immediately altered the energy of the room, power and authority radiating from him like heat. "Emma," he greeted, dark eyes moving appreciatively over my professional attire. A tailored navy dress from the collection he'd provided. "How are you settling in?" "It's a lot to absorb," I admitted. His smile was brief, but genuine. "You'll adapt quickly. You're more capable than you know." He checked his watch. "Lunch? We can discuss your initial responsibilities." The restaurant was on the building's penthouse level. Exclusive, discreet, with private dining areas for sensitive conversations. Antonio guided me with a hand at the small of my back, the touch proprietary in a way that didn't escape the notice of those we passed. Over a meal I barely tasted, Antonio outlined my role, managing his schedule, coordinating between his various business interests, handling sensitive correspondence, attending meetings as his proxy when appropriate. The position was far more involved than typical executive assistants. He was essentially making me his right hand. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since his first appearance in my hospital room. "There must be dozens of people more qualified with experience in your organization." Antonio's expression grew serious. "Experience can be acquired. Loyalty, integrity, intelligence, these are rarer commodities." He leaned forward. "You possess all three, along with something else I value." "What's that?" "Courage," he said simply. "You've faced hardship without becoming hardened. You've survived betrayal without becoming bitter. You've raised a child alone without using him as an excuse for failure." His dark eyes held mine. That kind of courage is exactly what I need beside me. The conviction in his voice stirred something in me. Pride, perhaps, or the recognition of being truly seen for the first time in years. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Days spent learning the intricacies of Antonio's business empire. Evenings with Tommy, who thrived in his new school and made friends despite the constant security presence. Nights alone, thinking of Antonio's careful professionalism during working hours, and the heat in his eyes when we occasionally found ourselves alone. He kept his distance, respecting the boundaries I'd established, but his interest remained palpable, in the gifts that appeared without ceremony. Books I'd mentioned, educational toys for Tommy, in the way his hand would brush mine when passing documents, in his insistence on driving me home himself at least once a week. Gradually, I began to understand the true nature of his organization. The legitimate businesses operated with ruthless efficiency, but beneath them ran currents of other enterprises. Protection rackets disguised as security services, shipping operations that occasionally transported items not listed on manifests, property developments that displaced rivals through means not entirely above board. Yet there were lines Antonio wouldn't cross. No drugs, no human trafficking, no harm to innocents. His criminal empire operated by a code as rigid as any legal system, perhaps more so, for the consequences of violation were swift and final. 1 month into my employment, I received my first true test of loyalty. A financial discrepancy appeared in accounts connected to one of Antonio's lieutenants, a man named Paolo, who managed distribution operations. Small amounts siphoned consistently over months, hidden skillfully, but not skillfully enough. Protocol dictated, I reported immediately. Yet something made me hesitate. In the weeks I'd worked with Paolo, he'd shown pictures of his children, spoken of his wife's illness, her expensive treatments not covered by insurance. I spent a sleepless night weighing options before making my decision. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with Antonio. In his office, with the door closed, I placed the financial records before him. "Paolo has been skimming," I said without preamble. "Small amounts, but it adds up to nearly 50,000 over the past year." Antonio's expression hardened, the dangerous man beneath the polished exterior emerging. "You're certain?" Yes. I took a deep breath. Before you act, you should know his wife has stage 4 cancer. The experimental treatment she's receiving costs thousands per month. You believe this justifies theft? His voice was dangerously soft. No. I met his gaze steadily, but it explains it. There's a difference between betrayal for greed and desperation from love. Antonio studied me for a long moment. What would you have me do, Emma? The question surprised me, that he would ask my opinion in such a matter. Give him a chance to make it right, not because he deserves it, but because of what it says about you, about the kind of leader you are. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or approval. Arrange a meeting with Paolo, this afternoon. I left his office uncertain whether I'd saved a man's life or signed his death warrant. Paolo entered Antonio's office at 3, his face ashen when he saw the financial records on the desk. I moved to leave, but Antonio gestured for me to stay. What followed was one of the most intense experiences of my life. Watching Antonio methodically break a man down to his foundations before offering unexpected redemption. He detailed Paolo's theft with cold precision, watching him crumble into tearful confession. Then, when Paolo clearly expected execution, Antonio offered a structured repayment plan and resources for his wife's treatment through a foundation I hadn't known existed. You stole from family, Antonio concluded, his voice steel wrapped in velvet. There is no greater betrayal, but family also forgives once. There will not be a second chance. After Paolo left, trembling with relief and renewed loyalty, Antonio turned to me. You influenced my decision. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I hope to. Why? Because mercy creates stronger loyalty than fear, I said simply. And because you're better than the world believes you to be. Something vulnerable flashed across his face before he controlled it. What do you believe I am, Emma? I considered the question carefully. A man of contradictions, dangerous but protective, ruthless but principled, capable of violence, but also of unexpected compassion. And does that man frighten you? He asked, moving closer. Less each day, I admitted. That night, Antonio invited me to dinner at his home. To celebrate your first successful intervention in family business, he said with a rare smile. With Tommy sleeping over at his new friend's apartment, under Dante's watchful eye, I accepted. The evening held a different energy than our previous dinner, less a negotiation, more a genuine connection between two people drawn increasingly together. Over dessert, Antonio poured us both brandy and raised his glass. To new beginnings, I clinked my glass against his. What beginning are we celebrating exactly? His dark eyes held mine. The beginning of honesty between us. No more pretending this is merely professional. My pulse quickened. Antonio, you feel it too, he stated with quiet confidence. This connection between us, it's been there from the first moment. I couldn't deny it. The awareness that hummed between us, the way my body responded to his presence, the dreams that had begun to haunt my nights. I do, I acknowledged softly, but it complicates things. You're my boss, my protector. I'm a man, he countered, reaching across the table to take my hand. A man who has waited patiently, who has respected your boundaries while making my interest clear. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. What are you asking for, Antonio? A chance, he said simply. To show you who I truly am, not the businessman, not the boss. Just the man who hasn't been able to look away from you since the moment I saw your photograph. The raw honesty in his voice broke something loose inside me. The careful walls I'd built after Tommy's father. The protective barriers that kept me focused solely on survival and my son's welfare. I'm afraid, I whispered, not pulling my hand away. Not of you, but of this. Of wanting something for myself after so long. Antonio rose and drew me to my feet, standing so close I could feel the heat of his body, smell the intoxicating scent of his cologne. Then let me want for you, he murmured, until you remember how. His hand cradled my face with infinite gentleness, at odds with the power I knew resided in those fingers. May I kiss you, Emma? Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. The kiss began softly, almost reverently. but quickly kindled into something more urgent. Years of suppressed desire blazing to life between us. His arms encircled me, drawing me against the solid wall of his chest as my fingers threaded through his dark hair. When we finally parted, both breathing heavily, Antonio rested his forehead against mine. "I've imagined this moment for so long," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "But reality surpasses fantasy." That night changed everything, not just because I stayed, experiencing a passion I'd never known possible, but because in Antonio's arms, I rediscovered parts of myself long buried. The woman beneath the survivor, the desires beneath the duties. Dawn found us tangled together in his bed, my head on his chest as he traced patterns on my bare shoulder. "What happens now?" I asked. Reality beginning to intrude on our cocoon of intimacy, Antonio's arms tightened around me. "Now we build something, together. For you, for Tommy, for us. Your world is dangerous," I reminded him. "Complicated." "It is," he acknowledged, "but it's also secure, loyal, family above all." He tilted my face up to his. "I won't pretend I can become something I'm not, Emma. But I can promise you this. No harm will ever come to you or Tommy again. What's mine, I protect with my life. And where yours?" I asked, needing to hear him say it. "You've been mine from the beginning," he said with absolute conviction. "Just as I've been yours, whether you knew it or not." 6 months later, Tommy and I moved permanently into Antonio's home, now warmed with photographs, children's artwork, the sound of laughter. My position evolved into a true partnership, both in business and in life. The danger never entirely disappeared. There were still rivals, still threats, but they were outweighed by the strength we found together. Antonio became the father Tommy had never had, patient and protective, teaching him about honor and family in ways a 5-year-old could understand. And to me, he was partner, protector, lover. The man who had seen my worth when I'd forgotten it myself. The whispers followed us, of course. The waitress who had captured the heart of one of the city's most powerful men, the single mother now wearing a flawless diamond on her left hand. Some said I'd been drawn into darkness, others claimed I'd brought light to a shadowed world. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between, in the gray areas where love and power intersect, where protection comes with possession, where a man capable of terrible violence can show unexpected tenderness. 1 year to the day after the attack that had changed everything, Antonio and I stood on the balcony of our home, watching Tommy play in the garden below, guarded as always by the vigilant Dante. "Any regrets?" Antonio asked, his arm around my waist. I leaned into his embrace, considering the journey that had brought us here. From fear to safety, from solitude to family, from struggle to strength. "None," I answered truthfully. "Every step led us here." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Show me the one who did this," he murmured, echoing words I'd later learned he'd spoken while viewing security footage of my attack. That's what I said to my men that night. By morning, justice was done. "Justice or vengeance?" I asked, though the distinction had blurred for me over time. Antonio smiled, the expression both tender and fierce. "When it comes to protecting what's mine, they're one and the same." In that moment, I understood completely. For in Antonio's world, now my world, justice wasn't found in courtrooms or legal systems. It was delivered through loyalty, through family, through the unbreakable bonds between those who had chosen each other against all odds. And in that world, despite its dangers and complexities, I had finally found something I'd stopped believing existed, a place where Tommy and I belonged, protected and cherished, no longer alone against an uncaring world. Whatever price came with it, that belonging was worth everything.